I now call on the Honourable Minister for Employment, Productivity and Industrial Relations, the Honourable Agni Deo Singh, to make his contribution. The floor is yours, sir.
Honourable Speaker, sir, the Honourable Prime Minister, Honourable Deputy Prime Ministers, Honourable Leader of the Opposition, Honourable Ministers, Honourable Assistant Ministers, Honourable Members of Parliament, guests in the gallery, and those watching live from their homes. I rise to join my fellow colleagues in my wholesome support for the 23-24 national budget as delivered by the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Strategic Planning, National Development and Statistics, Honourable Professor Biman Prasad, on 30th June 2023. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like to acknowledge the Honourable Minister for Finance for an exceptionally well-presented budget. After a long time, our budget has been timely delivered and conducted in the normal business hours. Our budget for the new Fiji, as stated by my other colleagues. Mr. Speaker, sir, before I go any further, I would just like to respond to some remarks that were made by the members of the opposition. First of all, Honourable Hemchand. Honourable Hemchand had questioned whether the executive teacher positions would be reinstated. I'm sure Mr. Honourable Chand was listening to the Honourable Minister for Education, and I'm very, very thankful to the Honourable Minister for Education for reinstating a host of benefits and provisions that were taken away during the reign of his government in the last 10 years. During the reign of the 4 or 5 or 6 ministers that he worked with as head of HR, and an equal number of permanent secretaries, by the way. I'm sure the teachers are now smiling. Executive teacher positions are also coming. The minister has already alluded to that. I think you missed it. Mr. Speaker, sir. Okay, you wait for it. Mr. Speaker, sir, I also would like to briefly respond to Honourable Naibal Urua when he alluded to the fact that we need counsellors. And yes, I fully agree. We need counsellors for our young people. And Mr. Speaker, sir, again, as a cost-cutting measure in 2010, the Fiji First government took away the executive teacher positions that were in 28 secondary schools in Fiji that had been in existence since 1999. And despite numerous requests by the teachers' unions, they didn't, of course, reinstate that. So now, the Honourable Minister has assured me that those positions are coming back. There's nothing much to do. All those teachers are there. All we need to do is to reappoint them. Mr. Speaker, sir, the graduate teachers are also receiving their full salary now, Mr. Speaker, sir, after so many years. Honourable Premila Kumari is sitting there. I came to see her. The only meeting I ever had with the Education Ministry in my former role during her reign, the only meeting I had during her reign when he was the head of HR, Honourable Chand, she was of the view that those teachers who were on higher salary as graduates, as evaluated by the job evaluation exercise, should be brought down to step 1, rather than taking those who were on step 1 up. Mr. Hemchand, Honourable Hemchand, if he is man enough, he will say yes. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, coming back to the budget. The budget has received overwhelming support and messages of appreciation from all sectors of the community, including, Mr. Speaker, sir, a public statement by the Chief Executive Officer of the Fiji Commerce and Employers Federation. Yes. The FSF, this man never saw Geneva, that is why he doesn't know Geneva. I will tell you about Geneva soon. Soon I'll tell you about Geneva. Mr. Speaker, sir, this budget is for rebuilding our future together under the strong and unwavering leadership of our Honorable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, sir, I believe the opposition must be living on another planet, because I don't know where they get their information from that people are unhappy. Mr. Speaker, sir, they voted for you then, they won't vote anymore for you. Mr. Speaker, sir, as highlighted by the Honorable Prime Minister in his address to the nation, and I quote, "The coalition government is defined by three words: freedom, unity, and progress in rebuilding Fiji together, which is reflective of the scope that we will work together with stakeholders and development partners to develop our nation towards sustainable prosperity." Mr. Speaker, sir, the above statement further underscores the commitment by the Honorable Prime Minister that the coalition government is the government of every Fijian, for every Fijian. Unlike the previous government, which practiced double standards, used divisive strategies, and was selective on whom they want to help. This 23-24 budget has been formulated to assist all Fijians, irrespective of their political affiliation and aspirations. The budget has been crafted with realism in response to real issues that our country is facing, but at the same time identified strategies for economic growth to rebuilding the nation. Mr. Speaker, sir, our coalition government's approach is to listen to the people through genuine engagement and consultations with all stakeholders. This is to ensure we prioritize areas badly neglected by the previous government for the 16 years they were there. For example, education, health, infrastructure like water, and agriculture, to name a few. The last 16 years, Mr. Speaker, has been a tumultuous chapter in our independent history. We will continue to experience the effects of bad governance for quite some years to come. But under the leadership of our Prime Minister, the coalition government will forge ahead to ensure national interest prevails at all times. Mr. Speaker, sir, in achieving this, the budget reflects the collaborative strategies of the coalition government. My ministry's vision of decent work and sustainable employment for all accentuates the mission to promote decent work opportunities, ensure safe and healthy workplaces, enhance productivity, and encourage good faith employment relations. Mr. Speaker, sir, the ministry is fulfilling the rebuilding of our nation through the revamping of our tripartite machinery, allowing the spirit of tripartism and good faith employment relations to be at the center of discussions. As a recognized approach that strengthens our ability to meet both domestic and global challenges and the workforce demands. Mr. Speaker, sir, as I alluded to in this House earlier, the labor laws were changed drastically to curtail, in the past decade, to curtail the rights of workers, unions, and their leaders. Fiji had been repeatedly cited for breaches of the core ILO conventions and blatant non-compliance with agreements signed in Geneva in 2015 and again in 2016. Mr. Speaker, we had a very, very bad international image. ILO is an organization of 187 countries. Mr. Speaker, sir, the first truly tripartite delegation to the International Labour Conference in over a decade was the last month. The CEO of the Fiji Commerce and Employers Federation, as well as the National Secretary of the Fiji Trades Union Congress, requested me as the leader of the delegation to address the conference on behalf of the entire delegation. We also met, Mr. Speaker, sir, with the Director General of ILO, as well as the Director Labour Standards as a team. They were delighted to hear about the progress we have made in the short span of 16 months to restore the fundamental trade union and human rights. The icing on the cake was the address of His Excellency the President, who was one of the selected heads of state invited to do so. The first ever in Fiji's history, Mr. Speaker said. Mr. Speaker, my predecessor did not attend a single international labour conference during his term of 4 years. Understandable, of course, Mr. Speaker. Understandable. How could he face the barrage of questions? How could he face the barrage of questions that were waiting for him? Mr. Speaker said his master had prepared all of it for him to go and answer. Mr. Speaker said he also would have had to answer how the National Secretary of the Fiji Trades Union Congress got arrested by the police from inside his boardroom on level 4 in the presence of the Director ILO South Pacific. Honorable Speaker, he left this onerous task of going to Geneva and facing the embarrassment to his staff, the permanent secretary and the rest of them. They tell me that they were very embarrassed. And now he has the audacity to question our travels. You will never understand because you have overschooled.
Order.
Mr. Speaker, sir, work is in progress to complete this exercise. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I believe at that point in time, Honorable Bala really intended to resolve that impasse and he wanted to travel to Geneva. But his master had other ideas. That is how that arrest took place, Mr. Speaker.
Can you name who was my master? I want to know. As a matter of interest, I want to know who was my master. I want to know. Because the rule is not only for opposition, Mr. Speaker said. Rule applies to everybody. I want him to name who was my master. If you are a man enough, you keep shut. You keep shut, I said. You keep shut. I'll throw this.
Mr. Speaker, sir, let me continue. Mr. Speaker, sir, that the 2023-2024 budget will assist the ministry in ensuring that we execute our targets within the 12 months. Our commitment to deliver on our promises and objectives to our people is not just to fulfill the budgetary requirements, but is underpinned by our values and principles to serve and provide excellent services to our community. Mr. Speaker, sir, the much publicized economic boom, or the Bainimarama boom, as was described by the former Minister for Economy himself, I believe, was only a dream. The current projection by the Minister for Finance is realistic and achievable. It has given us the boost and confidence in planning the future. Mr. Speaker, sir, it's common knowledge that Fiji is a small island nation, but intertwined by global and geopolitical interventions and conflicts, COVID-19 pandemic, interventions in climate change, etc., that impacted our people and country. However, we must not forget that while we had little or no control over these events, our country suffered its fair share of man-made disasters that left this country with a huge debt as a result of poor and dictatorial leadership. Mr. Speaker, while I acknowledge some progress made in the last 16 years, Honorable Bala should be happy, I'm also challenged by my conviction that the previous government had also created an environment of mistrust and fear. A government that brought pain to our citizens via the arbitrary rules and laws that impinge on workers' rights, banned tripartism, suppression of unions, arbitrary termination of workers, inhuman treatment of people, huge financial debts, unemployment, and the like. Mr. Speaker, sir, my ministry will continue to maintain an efficient and effective service delivery under the new budgetary allocation. We will continue to deliver quality services to the diverse range of stakeholders who have wider impact on our budget. I thank the Honourable Minister of Finance for providing my ministry with an extra 302,600 that will ensure the efficiency of operations through the provision of the much-needed resources on the ground. Mr. Speaker, sir, this includes 11 new staff that we are going to recruit. And I have alluded to this house earlier again, that there are 46 positions that have remained vacant for almost 3 years that remained unfilled. And because of that, my staff, our staff, were overworked. Mr. Speaker, out of that, we have filled 19 pre-COVID, pre-budget, and the 10 additional ones are now coming. Mr. Speaker, sir, we recognize that we have inherited a public debt of close to 10 billion. And with this in mind, we will have to ensure that our resources are fully utilized and rightfully invested in order to extract the much-needed revenue and returns that will assist government in mitigating its financial burden. Mr. Speaker, sir, with the theme, Building Our Future Together, my ministry firmly believes that Fiji's labour mobility program will play a crucial role in our economic recovery efforts through remittances from all our Fijian workers abroad. Mr. Speaker, sir, last year, our labour mobility program under our bilateral arrangement with Australia and New Zealand saw the participation of 4,072 Fijians. Mr. Speaker, sir, as alluded to by the Honourable Minister for Finance during his budget delivery address, remittances crossed the $1 billion mark last year and are likely to cross the $1.2 billion mark by the end of this year. This is very significant in relation to strengthening our labour mobility program. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is for the above reason that I wish to acknowledge the Honourable Minister and his team for their kind consideration in providing the necessary funding to support our labour mobility programs. The allocation for funding for another 5 project officers to assist our foreign employment service under NEC will bring much needed relief to our team. Mr. Speaker, with our growing numbers under the program, welfare issues are also growing. And the budgetary provision of $250,000 to support the recruitment of an additional liaison officer and the setup of a toll-free line for Australia is a testament of the coalition government's commitment in ensuring that the welfare of our workers while they are abroad is fully taken care of. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Australian government, again I have alluded to this earlier, had allocated $100,000 in 2021 for us to appoint a liaison officer. Mr. Speaker, this was languishing somewhere until I took office, and I am happy to report that we have now completed the exercise and the incumbent should be reporting to work in the next few weeks. Now we will have 2 liaison officers in Australia. Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir, that is action. Mr. Speaker, sir, in noting the gaps that are being created by our workers who have joined the labour mobility programs, the Honourable Minister of Finance statement on the huge responsibility to rebuild our technical education as well as address the skills gap issue, I wish to place on record my ministry's commitment to work closely with the Ministry of Education and other stakeholders in addressing the current challenges. The Labour Mobility Program is currently under review. Our Permanent Secretary has already started working in identifying strategies to mitigate various complaints and issues from both employers and employees abroad. These issues are in various forms and is largely due to the previous government's negligence on the duty of care of our citizens. For example, Mr. Speaker, sir, since 2018, the previous government made only 1 visitation to New Zealand to meet employers and workers, but none to Australia, where the bulk of the workers are. My team is currently working. Yeah, tell those to the workers, they will fix you right. My team is currently working on a new labour mobility framework and a metrics and plans to meet its counterparts in Australia and New Zealand to strengthen the program and mitigate workers and employers' issues. And again, the opposition will accuse us of travelling for joy. I invite them to ask those workers, Mr. Speaker. They will get an earful. Mr. Speaker, said the restoration of the 18% FNPF contribution from 1st January 2024 is good news for our workers. It will contribute to more to their lifelong savings and investment ability. A further welcoming news is the FNPF proposal to set up offshore operations which will extend membership of Fijians in Australia and New Zealand. This means our Fijian workers in New Zealand and Australia will have the opportunity to access services of the FNPF and have their deductions done there. Mr. Speaker, said $2,556,500 has been allocated to National OHS and Workers' Compensation Service, and my ministry is fully responsible to ensure that these laws are enforced and compliance is in practice. Mr. Speaker, said my ministry will continue to formulate new OHS laws and revise the laws that are now archaic or obsolete. The Health and Safety at Work Construction, the Health and Safety at Work Amusement Code of Practice, and other laws. Mr. Speaker, sir, we also are responsible for workers' compensation, and we are happy that we have an allocation of $500,000 to make sure injured workers are taken care of. Mr. Speaker, sir, my ministry is also with the restoration of the tripartite arrangement, ensuring that both the workers and employers are respected through dialogue, consultation, good faith, and negotiations. And this is ongoing, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, with the provision allotted to the labour compliance standards, we will continue to strengthen our enforcement and address in a timely manner. Mediation service, Mr. Speaker, we have a very competent mediation team, and we have been allocated $778,200 to carry out this work in the new financial year. And our mediators continue to promote cordial employment relations, promoting good faith, health and safety, productivity, and social justice to guide parties creating harmonious and productive industrial relations. Mr. Speaker, I would like to reiterate what was mentioned by the Honorable Minister for Finance regarding the levy for NTPC, or the levy for workers in-service training. The in-service training 1% was deducted and kept by NTPC for in-service training, productivity training, as well as apprenticeship scheme. Mr. Speaker, this was redistributed or distributed in this manner: 40% for ACC, Accident Compensation Commission, 50% to medical insurance levy, and 10% to productivity training. So, Mr. Speaker, 90% of the funds are no longer available for employers for training purpose. And this is a very serious state of affairs. We are intending to review this and ensure that the 1% levy comes back for the in-service training of workers. Mr. Speaker, this budget is a balanced and strong budget. This with decisive social policies by the coalition government. It will ensure people in our communities are supported through its benefits, which will open up great opportunities for all our citizens. We have to clean up the mess created by 16 years of poor governance and build the economy while we take care of those in need. 8 years extended to another 8 years. This budget clearly demonstrates that we have a workable plan to enable us to do so. There is no looking back, Mr. Speaker, The coalition government has demonstrated its pre-election commitment of being a government of empathy, care and compassion. This budget is undoubtedly the beginning of the greater good that lies ahead. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the privilege to speak on the budget, and I fully support the motion to approve the 2023-2024 national budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Minister for Employment, Productivity and Industrial Relations, for your contribution.